So welcome to this Tech Hour, and we're going to be discussing the experience of beginners, but we're going to look back about 20 years, or more than 20 years, 30 years, or perhaps longer, and look forward 20 years. So it's a big, long span. A lot has happened, a lot can happen in 50 years. All of us, I think, were introduced to tech sometime during the last century without going into details. And I think it would be nice to start by us talking about our first experience of tech and how we learned about it. Perhaps I can bow to Nelson, who's got seniority on this.
Okay, so I'm Nelson Beebe at the Mathematics Department at the University of Utah. And I happened to be at a conference in the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area in the late 1970s. And someone said, did you know that Don Knuth is giving a talk this afternoon at Xerox PARC? Would you like to come? And I said, absolutely. Because although I'd never met Don, I knew of his books and had high regard for them. And when I heard his talk, it really changed my life. And the reason it did was I had been very concerned about the problem of portability of software and of documentation thereof across a broad range of commercial machines of the time. And I had earlier in the 70s, I developed my own formatting system written in Fortran, because at the time that was really the only portable language there was. And had prepared a fair amount of documentation that way. But as soon as I saw what Don was doing, it was just so much more powerful. I decided this was where we had to go. And I had the good fortune to have the same physical hardware that Don did. We ran a different operating system. The DEC PDP-10 computers were 36-bit machines and were popular as departmental and university mainframes of sorts. They cost in the range of $200,000 to $500,000, so they were relatively expensive for the time. But the interesting thing about that machine was that all of these different operating systems that ran on it had a great deal in common, and you could move files back and forth, and even software. So software that Don was able to build at Stanford, I could immediately run at Utah. And I realized the first thing that was needed was to be able to get output. So we needed what Don called DVI drivers. Those of you who might be new to tech perhaps don't realize that TeX mode of operations, it's a typesetting engine that creates a very compact output file called a device independent file, a DVI file, that contains instructions for setting particular glyphs at particular locations on the page, along with other things like specials that allow you to insert an arbitrary string into the DVI file, which we then leverage to get graphics included. And so I spent a fair amount of time in the 80s developing a portable set of drivers for a fair number of devices, primarily printers of various types, plus a couple of screens. And when PostScript appeared in 1985, as I recall, this now was another leap in technology, because it meant that we could have a page description language that would be portable across devices and was powerful enough to typeset the image of essentially any page that humanity had ever produced in thousands of years of existence. So these two technologies were extremely important and continue to be. And so I continue to be heavily involved in tech and bibliographies and tech software and so on. And it's really had a big impact on my life. And pretty much everything I write in the form of formal documentation, including books, is done in tech. So I'll pass the baton now to Jonathan.
I wonder if Stephen would like to be next.
Yeah, sure, okay. It's so long ago that I started LaTeX.
Do you want to put your video on?
Okay,
You don't have to.
Hang on, I'm not sure I can figure out how to. Wait a minute, hang on, start the video.
Something's happening.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Hello. Okay, so as I say, it's so long ago that I started learning LaTeX that I really can't remember the details. But what got me motivated for it is linguistics is my trade. And so it was simple frustration with not being able to draw trees using something like Word. And so I started teaching myself LaTeX, and I'm entirely self-taught. And I used it, well, just regularly throughout the rest of my academic life. And I also got around to teaching it to our students.
Oh, can I ask when it was, what year it was that you started using it?
Well, I retired in 2006. So it must have been during the 1990s, I guess, that I got going.
So that's 10, 15 years after Nelson.
Right.
Okay. I'll go on next, if I may. So I wrote my PhD, which was awarded, I think, in 1983. And that was typed using technical typing, IBM golf balls and special features. And every symbol had to involve a different keyboard, so to speak. And in about the same time, I was working for a university in the United States that had a fairly close relationship with digital equipment, and they were pioneering, along with IBM, the personal computer. So I actually had a PC at home. It was a work computer that I was allowed to take home, and that was pretty unusual in those days. And I also had a printer, and I wrote up some mathematics, and I had to do funny things. I can't remember what they were, to get subscripts and superscripts, and I actually felt rather limited in my vocabulary. So if I move on a bit, in 1986 or 87, I was working somewhere else, and one of the people there, the person who invited me, gave a talk on tech. And they're running it on their Unix system, and they showed various things about it. And I thought, oh, well, this is quite interesting. And I used TROF, and I can't remember the name of the other bits and pieces, to write a piece of mathematics using the system. And I learned VI, and that was done on a glass terminal, I think, and to preview, you had to print things out. And then I moved again, and the university offered PC Tech and other tools as a sort of package that came on a stack of compact floppy disks that are about this high. There are 360K density floppy disks about this high. There are about 20 or 30 of them, mostly fonts. So I bought that, and I bought my own PC so I could actually do things. And I bought a laser printer. I think the laser printer was about $1,500, and the PC was about $2,000. It was that sort of price. And that's what got me going in tech. And that was 1983 was the first time I used a personal computer, or a computer, if you like. And 4 or 5 years later, about 6 years later, I had my own PC that I could use with tech. And from then on, it became one of the standard things I had. So that's my sort of introduction to tech. I wonder if, Juan, you'd like to say a few words, and then I think John, if he's willing to, could introduce himself and also say a few words, just on how I first came into contact with tech. My life as a beginner in tech. That's the sort of theme for the moment.
Okay, sure. First of all, I would like to thank you for organizing this Tech Hour. I've been curious of following the Tech Hour because I am in the Mac OS distribution list, and I've seen so many announcements and so many interesting topics like making accessible text accessible for people with disadvantages. And I am myself a user, so I haven't been developing anything. My first contact with tech was more than 30 years ago, probably 1986, 1988. I came from Venezuela to do a sabbatical, live in University of California, Berkeley. And I met two very talented graduate students, math students, William Geller and Ted Jones. And they basically introduced me to tech. And for me, it was an eye-opener. And I wish I had had tech much earlier when I was doing, for example, class notes in algebraic topology for a colleague. And I think most of what I did was lost because I then used a typewriter and the information is quickly lost. So I started using tech back then. I was mainly a basic tech user. But for the Macintosh platform, I got a software called Textures that came with many floppies also. And now I'm gradually transitioning to LaTeX because I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I found myself reinventing the wheel so many times when creating textbooks and introducing my own macros. So right now I am transitioning to LaTeX, and I really welcome you guys, the support that you give, and everybody in the macOS tech distribution list. There are so many dedicated people who are really supporting the language and this wonderful feature. And also the portability of tech, I think, became so much better when the output now is in PDF directly. Before that, I had to use some clumsy conversions from DVI to something that looked printable. And now it's all done automatically. Now I am an instructor now in University of the Stockton University, which is not far from Atlantic City. And of course, now we are struggling like all small universities because the enrollment is catastrophically going down. So we are wondering how we will survive for the next years. So that's my short introduction.
Thank you very much, Juan. I wonder at zero notice, John, if you'd be willing to make a similar statement about yourself. Hello, John?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Did you ask me to make a statement about my interest in tech or?
Yeah, I think the circumstances around your being a beginner in tech in particular.
Well, I got started using tech because I was very frustrated with commercial word processing software. Word did not turn out nicely formatted technical documents for me. And so tech was a savior, and I've been using it for years now. My syllabi, my course outlines, my lecture notes, and so forth are all in LaTeX, and I'm quite happy, and I'm interested in seeing what's new.
Okay, you finished?
Yes.
Okay. So, gosh, the experience that people have as beginners now is very different, of course. Certainly, I don't think anybody is going to repeat Nelson and say, "Oh, this tech system seems very interesting, but I have to write some software before I can use it." And I think we're a bit unusual in that we're all of a certain age, and well, I'm thinking back to myself. Having access to a computer was the first step, if you like. It was an insuperable hurdle for most tech users. Most people who might have wanted to use tech didn't have a computer, didn't have access to a computer. Whereas now you can get a computer, a Raspberry Pi is £35, $35. The whole thing's changed considerably. And I know that something that struck me was we all wanted to produce, what's the word? Complicated technical documents. Documents that were quite demanding and documents for which we had a big investment. And I feel that has perhaps allowed us not to pay proper attention to the barriers to entry.